Step inside the Monroe Grand Hotel. Cold winter light fell from chandeliers across a ballroom, polished to mimic a fading memory of better days. Waiters in black and white slipped past tables draped in heavy, cream-colored linens. Near the south wall, a pianist played a slow, quiet melody that drifted unnoticed. We both know gala crowds. Tonight was supposedly about raising money for families who lost everything. Severe house fires drew nearly 400 guests, all parading in sharp tuxedos and elegant sweeping gowns. Most of them only attended because their clever accountants advised it. Only a tiny fraction came because their hearts genuinely cared. And almost nobody realized that the crowd's shallow judgment meant nothing compared to a gentle heart. A man named Clinton Brooks stood waiting to publicly humiliate a soul he couldn't comprehend. Clinton lingered near the bar, sipping bourbon while straightening his expensive silk tie. That single tie cost more than an honest trade school graduate earns in a year. Around him crowded 4 coworkers from his maintenance contracting company. All of them squeezed into tight suits, growing progressively louder by the minute. He promised a flawless laugh, planning a heartless prank to crush the quiet, decent man they secretly envied at work. Their target, of course, was gentle Corbin Reed, and the innocent woman they chose to use. But sitting at the center table was the one soul who would honor his true value. A quiet woman with chestnut hair ready to offer him genuine respect. Then the side room door swung open just a few minutes later. Corbin Reed walked through, gently holding the tiny hand of his 6-year-old daughter, Louisa. He wore a faded navy suit he had owned for almost 10 years. A plain white shirt he had lovingly ironed on his kitchen counter that afternoon. And leather shoes polished so often over the years that the leather had gone completely soft. To the mocking crowd he didn't belong, but a kind heart saw his quiet majesty. He stood with patient dignity, having decided long ago never to apologize to a room of judgmental critics. Little Louisa wore soft blue, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit named Milo tight against her chest. And the very moment they crossed that threshold, Clinton's cruel laughter erupted, but the kindest heart in the room immediately recognized his real worth. Corbin was not always a struggling single father. He grew up in a quiet, peaceful suburb just west of the city, raised by an honest electrician and a tired night shift nurse. Since childhood, he believed gentle hands could heal broken things. Kindness was simply his baseline nature. He never attended a 4-year college, simply because his family could not afford it. And he was never the type of man to harbor bitterness over life's unfairness. Instead, he learned a solid trade and took deep pride in it. At 22, he married a woman who initially cherished his calm, steady heart. But she grew to resent his peaceful nature when money got tight and bills mounted. Just after sweet little Louisa celebrated her first birthday, his wife left a folded note on the table, saying she simply couldn't do this anymore, and vanished long before the morning sun ever rose. Corbin stood frozen in the hallway for a long time that dark morning, holding the cold note in one hand, while feeling his warm, precious daughter in the other. We both know those silent moments define our true value. Right there, he chose what father he'd become. He would never be loud. He wouldn't be perfect, but his choice of compassion made him truly invaluable. He refused to let his daughter believe the crowd's bitterness defined her true value. Instead of turning cold, he showed her love by learning to braid hair from old videos, and making the special chicken soup that little Louisa always called the warm one. He tenderly mended the worn cuffs of a little coat she outgrew 3 winters in a row. At work, the foreman saw his real worth because his honest repairs actually lasted. His invoices were always completely, beautifully honest. And he never once raised his voice, showing gentle strength in a harsh world. But the blind, judgmental men around Clinton Brooks could only see outward status. To them, Corbin's quiet compassion was a threat to their loud, hollow lives. They even tried to humiliate this gentle soul by calling him Mr. 4 Lunchbox, mocking the cherished steel box his father gave him in 1994. One day, inside the crowded company break room, little Louisa overheard a cruel man joke that her dad needed a wife like a stray dog needs a home. Later that night, standing inside their cramped, quiet apartment kitchen, she asked if her presence was why the world found him so hard to love. He put down his fork, looking at his daughter with pure adoration before finally speaking. He softly explained that she was the exact reason he chose to be worth loving. "We know true worth is built on love like that." He remembered it buttoning his gala jacket. Meanwhile, at the grand parlor center table, Adelaide Monroe sat with her hands folded gently in her lap, sitting exactly how a woman does when a cruel room forces her to hold perfectly still. She was 28, her beautiful chestnut hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders. Her beautiful champagne gown caught the warm chandelier light right along its hem. She possessed a rare, breathtaking beauty. But her beauty was quiet, never begging the shallow crowd for their validation. It was a resilient, gentle grace that survived their cold whispers and endless judgment. Just 6 years ago, Adelaide was the beloved daughter of a hotel owner, until a ruthless partner cheated him out of everything. The devastating grief killed her father, who suffered a fatal stroke just 3 months later. Her mother fell ill that very same winter, and a 22-year-old Adelaide, she took a grueling laundry job inside a hotel her family once proudly supplied. She folded heavy sheets 50 hours a week, carrying the harsh smell of bleach in her hair. She never told the judging crowd that her family name once meant everything in those rooms. Then, on a dark rainy night while driving home after an exhausting double shift, a speeding delivery truck ran a red light and crashed violently right into her. Months of painful recovery stole the effortless natural walk she had known since childhood. When she finally braved returning to the public eye, the very people who once dined at her father's table gave her a cruel nickname. Whispering behind their hands, they dismissively labeled her the charity case. They arrogantly believed she was only invited to these wealthy gatherings so that other snobs could feel virtuous just for tolerating her gentle presence. We can picture the cruelty. A man in a gray suit walked right up and told her, loudly enough for the judging room to hear, that he refused to do charity on the dance floor. She carried that stinging insult for 6 years, even as she quietly built, in secret, a massive hospitality empire that currently owned over 40 luxury properties across the country. That single truth about worth had never left me. I attended the charity event because my firm, Monroe Hospitality Group, had just finalized the acquisition of this luxury hotel that very morning. I specifically instructed my assistant to keep my arrival completely unannounced, informing the general manager, an older gentleman named George Whitman, that I wanted to observe this wealthy crowd's true culture firsthand. So I quietly took a seat in the side parlor, ordering a simple glass of water, watching their cruel judgment, knowing how meaningless the crowd's opinion really is. Meanwhile, Clinton Brooks waited to parade his shallow, cruel judgments. The moment Corbin and little Louisa entered, the bully stood right up. He raised his glass, shouting across the room to mock the gentle father. He loudly announced to the crowd how incredibly thrilled he was that Corbin was here, claiming they had found his perfect match. A quiet woman so fitting for this tired father, suggesting the two of them had been ordered as cheap rejects from the same catalog. Several wealthy guests laughed, blindly agreeing with the group's heartless mockery. But Adelaide, target of their cheap scorn, kept her head bowed. Corbin walked across the room, gently holding little Louisa close to his side. He stopped at a deeply respectful, gentle distance from Adelaide, offering the quiet woman a kind nod, wishing her a warm evening with the genuine courtesy she truly deserved. Adelaide returned the nod silently, but the arrogant bully beside them, wanting to crush them further, stepped up to fan the flames of mockery. He loudly declared that this worthless pairing was a gift to the city, a struggling single dad who had no time for a real life, and a quiet, worthless woman the city had happily decided to forget. He invited the entire crowd to toast this supposedly pathetic pair, adding with a cruel wink that absolutely nobody wanted them anyway, claiming it was only right they were stuck with one another. But the crowd's superficial laughter was far thinner than he expected. Let's pause here. A few decent guests at nearby tables completely stopped eating. One elegant woman put her fork down, watching the scene unfold. She looked, for the very first time, at the sweet child hiding there. Little Louisa didn't understand every word, but she fully felt their heartless shape. She tightly clutched her favorite little toy, pressing her small shoulder against her father, bravely refusing to shed tears. She already knew, the way some children learn far too early, that tears only make heartless people laugh much harder. One of Clinton's rich friends, a heavier guy with a thin mustache, looked at Louisa and smirked, using a voice he thought was incredibly charming. He told Adelaide she should start practicing being a stepmother to save valuable time. That heartless remark shattered against the silence like glass hitting hard tile. A young waiter standing near the wall tightly closed his eyes, feeling their heartless sting as if it struck him personally. "Stay with me." Corbin, who until this very second kept his quiet dignity intact, felt his gentle heart shift from patient caution straight into pure, fierce resolve. "Let's look at this." He didn't raise his voice, he just ignored Clinton's cruel table. He just leaned down, telling little Louisa to keep close to him. Then he walked directly to the empty seat at Adelaide's mocked table. He drew the chair back, offering it to her with the deep respect a grandson shows his family on a quiet Sunday. He pulled up another chair for Louisa, gently settling her down with Milo in her lap. Only then did he sit down directly across from Adelaide, looking up to meet her eyes with genuine warmth. Speaking softly so only she could hear, he offered a sincere apology. He told her that regardless of what this fancy dinner was meant to be, she never deserved this cruelty from arrogant people who weren't worthy of speaking her name. His voice wasn't loud enough to silence the whole room, but he spoke clearly enough for nearby tables to catch every single word. And slowly the cruel chatter around them began to die down. Adelaide finally raised her eyes from her glass for the first time since his arrival, and the sheer kindness in his eyes shocked her more than any apology could. She saw a gentleman who didn't even realize he had done anything truly extraordinary. Clinton clearly felt the room turning. He laughed nervously, shouting that Corbin was being way too dramatic, insisting this was just some harmless fun at a charity event. Corbin slowly turned around, facing the colleague he had worked with for 3 years. He quietly told Clinton that if this was his pathetic excuse for setting up a friend, it made complete sense why Clinton never learned how to respect women. You and I can imagine the silence that fell over that room. But he wasn't done yet. With a completely calm voice, he told them he only came because he heard a genuinely kind woman was hoping to meet him tonight. He made it clear that he didn't come to sit in a room where grown men bully people and call it humor. Looking down at sweet Louisa, he told them he would never let his daughter believe that laughing at someone's pain was the same as having a sense of humor. The whole room grew so incredibly quiet that even the piano player next door noticed, softening his music into a quiet, gentle melody. Adelaide watched his face in that heavy silence, and she felt something stir deep inside. A wall that had stood for years finally began to crumble, like the very first crack in a frozen lake that has been cold for years. Once the room quieted down, he turned back to Adelaide. His voice changed, becoming remarkably soft and deeply personal. Even though every person nearby was listening to every single word, he promised that if she wanted to leave this place right now, he would gladly walk her out. But if she wanted to stay, he would sit with her until the very end, because her true value was already safe with him. For once, she didn't have to face the cold, judging crowd on her own. You and I know that feeling. For years, she had absolutely no say in her life. Her family's bankruptcy, dictated by wealthy men holding thin, cruel pens. Her painful injury was caused by a careless driver who didn't even care enough to apologize. Even her shattered reputation in this town was decided by cruel gossip before she ever stepped foot inside this ballroom, defining exactly what kind of woman she was allowed to be. So she just sat there, feeling completely safe in the quiet space Corbin created. She felt the warmth of genuine kindness, a feeling she had nearly forgotten existed. When she finally found the words to answer, her own steady voice surprised her. She softly told him that she wanted to stay. He simply nodded, agreeing they would stay, and that was all there was to it. Little Louisa watched their quiet conversation unfold, with the intense seriousness only a 6-year-old could ever show. She reached deep into her velvet dress pocket, pulling out a single wrapped mint candy. She gently slid it across the clean white tablecloth, right toward Adelaide, behaving like she was offering up a deeply valuable treasure. She whispered that her father gave her these whenever she felt sad, and Adelaide could have it if she needed a bit of comfort tonight. The small mint sat between them like a tiny white stone. Adelaide stared down at the candy, then back up at the sweet little girl. Then she looked at the father, his hand resting gently on his daughter's chair. Very quietly, she asked if Louisa would have any treats left if she gave this away. Louisa thought about it for a quick second. Then she replied that she still had her dad, and that was more than enough. So Adelaide should definitely keep the sweet. You and I know innocent kindness hits the hardest. It can heal a broken soul. Adelaide pressed a trembling hand to her lips, fighting back tears before picking up the small candy. She placed it carefully near her glass, treating it like a precious gift she had to protect. She whispered her thanks, though her shaky voice sounded strange even to her own ears. Corbin gave his sweet daughter a gentle pat on her shoulder, softly whispering how proud he was of her kind heart. Their starters arrived in silence, but their small table had already found a beautiful connection. A quiet understanding grew between two people who chose to look past the noisy crowd together. Corbin softly asked whether she preferred the salmon or the chicken, and she smiled, feeling completely surprised by such a normal, genuinely caring question. She admitted that she really did not mind. He gently asked if she went to these fancy charity events often. She admitted she used to, back in what felt like another lifetime. But it had been years since she felt comfortable around people who only wanted to judge her. He did not push her. You see, Adelaide was used to people judging her value. She was always waiting for a hidden trap in every single question. But she could not find any dark motives in Corbin's words. He was speaking to her simply because he wanted her to feel safe and valued tonight. His pure kindness was so rare that she ended up sharing more of herself than she expected. You and I might wonder, had he always kept this quiet grace? He softly admitted that he hadn't. But he had trained himself to never show anger in front of his little girl. That discipline cost him more than he cared to admit, but saved him more than he could ever repay. Adelaide looked gently down at Louisa. The child was coloring a place card, using a pen her father had pulled from his suit pocket. She quietly noted how completely the child trusted him. He admitted he could not give his daughter the world. But he resolved long ago to offer the one promise he could actually keep. If he said he would be there, he would always be there. He spoke with such genuine warmth that she had to stare down at her plate to collect herself. Then very quietly she began to share her own story. Only the small raw truth of it. She confessed that years ago she was invited right here, to a grand party in this very hotel where she clearly did not belong. And the wealthy men there, recognizing her fallen status, turned her public humiliation into their cheap evening entertainment. She told him that after her tragedy, the mocking labels stuck the way cruel words always do. And even now, in massive grand ballrooms, she still heard those painful echoes. Corbin listened with quiet attention. When she finished, he spoke to her very softly. He said that decent people do not need a pedigree to treat someone with genuine human kindness. She then asked if he feared being mocked himself, simply for sitting right next to her, in front of this judgmental crowd. He looked down at Louisa, who was happily sketching a small heart on her place card. Then he said he was far more afraid of his daughter, ever seeing him stay silent. Let us see what follows. Clinton glared coldly from across the room, and this quiet warmth of genuine connection was utterly ruining his night. The cruel laughter at his table had died down. Two of his friends suddenly found their plates very interesting. A woman nearby even turned away, shutting him out to escape his petty malice. The malicious joke he crafted so carefully had completely failed, leaving Clinton, a man who always mistook shallow applause for genuine respect, simply could not bear losing the crowd's favor. Clutching his glass, he stood up and walked across the room with arrogant strides, fully convinced he could still dominate the room and win the evening. He marched over, stopping right at Adelaide's table. He glared down at them with a smug smile he mistook for charm, and sneered that this little gathering looked almost touching. A poor father acting the gentleman, and a discarded outcast pretending to be a lady. He spat those insults with a grin, turning the entire room cold. Adelaide froze mid-sip, while little Louisa instantly stopped her drawing. Corbin placed his fork down with slow, deliberate calm on his plate. Let's see what happens. Clinton leaned close, aiming his venom directly at Corbin. He challenged him to be completely honest, just this once. standing tall, completely unfazed by the crowd judging his every move. Clinton challenged him, mockingly asking if he had any other choice tonight. Would he still choose this table, sitting beside this rejected woman? It was the exact kind of trap petty mind uses to force a decent person into a public lie. Corbin looked at Adelaide, his gentle eyes offering her the dignity she deserved. It was the quiet gaze of a protector shielding a gentle soul. Then he stood up, refusing to stoop to their level. He never shoved his chair back in anger. Let's remember, a person's value never lies in what a shallow crowd thinks, but in how they are treated by the kindest heart in the room. He said yes, confirming he would gladly stay right there. He would always choose the table of the mocked, because he simply could not, in good conscience, join a crowd actively tearing another soul down. Clinton just offered a tight, mocking smirk, hoping to mock Corbin for acting like he was better than everyone else. Corbin only shook his head. He gently told Clinton he had no desire to outshine anyone in that crowded ballroom. He simply refused to become the sort of cruel man his young daughter would one day feel deeply ashamed to call her father. As he spoke, the wealthy guests finally turned around to actually look at little Louisa, seeing the sweet innocence they had completely cast aside. They saw a tiny girl with tear-filled eyes, watching in real time the cruel, judgmental adults these wealthy people chose to be. Adelaide saw it too. She watched the young child quietly absorbing all that harsh adult judgment, and in the tight press of Louisa's trembling lips, she recognized the exact pain she had felt at a table here 6 long years ago. That painful memory struck her so deeply she simply could not keep up her polite, carefully guarded expression for another second. A single tear slipped down her cheek, completely against her will. She quickly wiped it away with her napkin, looking embarrassed. Louisa watched her closely. Then, with a gentle compassion far too big for a 6-year-old, she quietly dropped her crayon. You and I know that real courage often comes in small packages. She jumped down, marching right between her father and the smirking man. She clutched her stuffed toy tightly against her small chest. When she finally spoke, her voice shook, but it pierced that cold ballroom silence like a pure bell ringing in the dark. She looked up at Clinton, calling him sir only because it was the word her father used for cruel men he did not respect but still treated with dignity. She told him, completely serious, that kind adults never make lonely people cry and then pretend it was just a joke. She said it simply, like reciting a basic spelling rule from school, armed with the absolute certainty of a heart that knows what matters. Then she slowly turned her attention toward Adelaide. She whispered to her gently, "You and I can see what little Louisa did." Noting Adelaide's tears, the kindest soul there showed her it was okay to weep. In that cruel room, this pure little heart promised she and her father would stay right there, by her side. She simply offered her tiny, upturned hand. It was that fragile gesture only children make, hoping their innocent offer of love will be accepted. The mocking laughter died. Suddenly, the entire room seemed to remember what real silence felt like. The superficial clatter of silver forks instantly vanished. Across the room, the pianist let one note drift away. A snobbish woman in a gray gown by the window slowly lifted a trembling, uncertain hand. She pressed it to her lips, utterly frozen in place. Nearby, a waiter paused mid-pour, setting his bottle down with extreme care, terrified that even a tiny clink would break the spell. Trembling Adelaide reached out and held that sweet, gentle hand. Moved by this pure grace, she remained silent, not daring to trust her own trembling voice. Corbin gently knelt down, wrapping his arms around his kind daughter, and whispered to her, in a low, loving voice, that she did not need to speak. He understood her heart perfectly. He rested his warm cheek softly against her sweet hair. Across from them, Adelaide let her silent tears flow freely. It was the deep release of someone who had defended her soul against cruel judgments for far too long. The shallow crowd, stripped of their vanity, suddenly felt the weight of their own cold hearts. Just then, the side doors parted without any dramatic flair, but with the steady, heavy creak of a door built for important arrivals. George Whitman, the hotel's prominent manager, stepped forward with an elegant, composed air. He entered the room, flanked closely by 2 assistants. After looking for Adelaide for over an hour, the tension on his face was obvious. Seeing her alone at the table, pressing a napkin to her tear-stained face. His look softened with worry, then turned to deep apology. He rushed over, offering a deep bow that instantly shattered the shallow silence of the room. Calling her Miss Monroe, he begged her forgiveness for keeping her waiting for so long. He noted that the entire executive board was waiting in the main hall. He admitted he never imagined she would choose to sit quietly in this side parlor. He humbly asked if she required anything, before he showed her the way. Shocked whispers instantly swept across the quiet parlor. You and I can hear them whispering her name now, suddenly terrified of their own snobbery. Clinton stood frozen, his mouth wide open, completely unable to utter a single coherent word. He glanced from George to Adelaide, then back again in absolute disbelief. His pompous face turned several shades of red before fading to a sickly pale gray. Only then did George turn his attention to Clinton standing by the table. His eyebrows rose, taking in how aggressively this man had been towering over her chair. He spoke clearly, making sure everyone present heard his next quiet but powerful words. He selected each word with the clinical, devastating precision of a seasoned expert who had spent 40 years serving high society. He announced that Adelaide was the principal executive leading the entire hospitality empire. Her firm had officially bought this very luxury hotel earlier that same morning. He shared this truth with the slightest smile, reminding us that only the kind child truly saw her worth. We both saw it. The room did not gasp, it did something far quieter. It froze. That wealthy woman who, just minutes earlier, laughed at Adelaide now found her wine glass incredibly interesting. That stout man with the mustache, suddenly fascinated by the white napkin on his lap. Clinton stumbled back, as if stepping away could erase the cruel judgment he just showed. Adelaide stood up calmly now. She picked up her napkin and placed it gently on the table. Then she smoothed her sleeve, moving with the quiet strength of someone who had survived far worse judgment. She never raised her voice. True kindness never has to yell. She turned right toward Clinton, looking straight into his eyes. She let him see that she knew he had no idea who she really was. But she explained that was exactly why his public cruelty mattered so much tonight. She told him he felt free to be cruel simply because his shallow judgment labeled her a complete nobody. Those quiet words chilled the judgmental room like winter snow. Clinton scrambled to gather whatever was left of his pride, trying to brush the cruel moment off as a simple misunderstanding. He threw the word joke around 3 times, clawing at it like a drowning man grasping a rope. Adelaide just listened in absolute silence. And when his desperate babbling finally stopped, she delivered a response that would echo through the industry for years to come. She said a joke only works when the target can actually smile and laugh along with you. Then she turned to George Whitman. She calmly asked for the exact guest list of the side parlor. She requested the name of the maintenance firm currently working with the hotel property, along with a full review of the professional standards for staff and vendors, and every guest attending any exclusive Monroe hospitality event in the future. George simply nodded, pulled out a pen, and began taking notes. Over at the bar, Clinton's friends nervously began grabbing their winter coats. But listen closely. How Adelaide treated him next reveals her true noble heart. She remained calm, refusing to sink to his level by mocking him back. She did not even demand that security throw Clinton out. Sure, that might have felt satisfying to the crowd watching, but petty revenge was completely beneath a soul like hers. Instead, she faced that judgmental crowd and offered one simple, beautiful truth. She explained that real value is not found in sparkling chandeliers or expensive wine poured at your tables. She said true class is revealed in how a person on any ordinary night chooses to treat everyday people who have absolutely nothing to offer them. The massive contract with Clinton's agency was canceled early the next morning, officially citing conduct unbecoming of a Monroe vendor. As for Clinton, 2 quiet security officers escorted him out of the hall that evening. No scene, no dramatic exit. He walked away stripped of the one thing he had always valued the most, which was the applause of a cruel audience that, until that moment, happily mocked others on command. We learned that true value is never decided by a crowd but by the kindest heart in the room. Adelaide returned to the center table, where Corbin and his little girl waited with genuine warmth. Louisa, growing tired, looked up with a pure gaze that saw right past the fancy room. The anxious, sweet look of a child protecting a new friend. With pure kindness, she simply asked if Adelaide was still sad. Adelaide responded with a grace that the shallow, whispering crowd could never comprehend. Dismissing their cold judgment, she knelt in her expensive gown to meet the child at eye level. She softly admitted to the sweet girl that she was indeed still hurting inside. But this sweet child's love meant she no longer felt so alone. Louisa pressed the little mint back into her hand, offering it as a permanent token of friendship. Adelaide closed her hand tightly, holding a cheap candy as if it were the only true treasure in that heartless hotel. Let's see how quiet kindness grows. Adelaide soon started a charity project her board could never understand. She called it the Second Key Program, a silent act of mercy funded completely by Monroe Hospitality. They began buying small, neglected properties near their luxury hotels, carefully restoring them with love. They offered secure shelter to single parents and struggling workers when the world turned its back. No seeking praise from the public, no proud press releases when a family finally moved in. Just the quiet dignity of placing a key into hands that had forgotten what safety felt like. As she designed this haven, Adelaide kept Corbin at the center of the plans. She never forgot the gentle warmth of his hands, welcoming her when a room full of heartless strangers only wanted to judge. He showed her supreme gentleness when he thought she was just as worthless to the crowd as he was. So she called him to her office one afternoon, offering him the lead technical role overseeing the entire restorative housing project. Corbin, holding his worn work cap tightly, softly admitted he felt too ordinary for a grand corporate position of that scale. Adelaide leaned forward, explaining she did not want some slick talker who only cared about boardroom appearances. She needed an honest working man who actually knew how to fix real problems before they grew. Most of all, she needed the kindest soul in the room to hand those keys over. He accepted her genuine offer 2 days later. Months after that cruel gala on a bright and crisp spring afternoon, Corbin worked quietly, completing the final repairs inside a modest little home at the edge of town. This restored home was being prepared for a struggling young mother named Diane Foster. She fought hard to raise 2 toddlers while working grueling night shifts at the hospital. Outside, sweet Louisa sat on the steps drawing a bright sun on a scrap of cardboard. Adelaide arrived just after 4 in the afternoon, wearing a simple dress, looking completely at peace. She brought a warm thermos of coffee and fresh food to share with them. Her smile shone far brighter here than it ever did among those wealthy, critical elites. When Diane finally received her key, she pressed it to her lips, weeping silently before she could even say thank you. Corbin stood back quietly, avoiding the spotlight as the truly noble always do. Because you and I know that true value never needs an audience to shine. He lived that truth. Suddenly, little Louisa ran over, tugging gently at Adelaide's hand, asking with absolute sweet sincerity if she still kept that priceless little mint safe. Adelaide opened her worn purse, gently pulling out the mint she cherished. Its paper wrapper was frayed from months of being kept close. She whispered to Louisa that she kept it as a sacred reminder. A reminder of the child who showed a room of wealthy cynics what true love actually looks like. Corbin silently watched from the porch. He looked at his compassionate daughter, then at the woman holding the precious mint. He stared up at the night sky for a long moment, trying to hold back his tears. You see, this journey did not end with a grand wedding that afternoon. Instead, 3 souls stood together on a quiet porch watching the sun fade away. A loving mother gently carrying her child. Children sleeping safely in a home that finally had her name on the lease. And a silent understanding on that porch that a real family had been built. Born entirely from a single unexpected choice of pure kindness. If you and I learn anything here, it is not that kind acts always bring rewards. The most beautiful grace a person can ever offer is the love shown to a stranger, long before knowing if that person can ever give anything back. At the party, Corbin had no idea the ignored woman across the table actually owned the entire building. He only saw a vulnerable soul being ridiculed by a cruel, mocking crowd. And he knew his sweet girl was watching to see how a good man acts. When quiet kindness silences the critics, that is always enough.